As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, all eyes are on the unfolding events in China this week, a country grappling with increasing scrutiny from the United States over trade practices and drug trafficking. In a climate marked by rising tensions and economic uncertainty, President Donald Trump has embarked on a new wave of trade pressure, particularly targeting China with significant tariffs. This move is emblematic of a broader strategy that intertwines economic policy with domestic political imperatives, especially regarding the ongoing opioid crisis in the U.S. In a recent announcement, Trump indicated plans to impose an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese imports. Building on a previous tariff that had already increased costs for American consumers and businesses alike. This decision comes on the heels of what many see as China's reluctance to engage substantively with the U.S. administration. While Canada and Mexico swiftly responded to similar threats in January by demonstrating their commitment to curbing illegal drug trafficking, China has adopted a more cautious approach, leading to a stalemate in negotiations. As Trump's administration ramps up its aggressive stance, the Chinese government is left navigating a complex web of international relations, trying to decipher the U.S. administration's true intentions. Michael Pillsbury, a notable China expert, remarked, "The Chinese are suspicious in the initial rounds of a negotiation that there are hidden traps or other reasons to be cautious." This sentiment is echoed by Myron Brilliant, who noted that the Chinese are currently in a wait-and-listen mode, attempting to assess the implications of ongoing U.S. tariffs while signaling a willingness to negotiate a mutually beneficial trade agreement. The stakes are high. Trump's tariffs are not merely economic tools but are also deeply intertwined with his political agenda. Analysts suggest that the administration is leveraging the fentanyl crisis to justify these tariffs, framing the issue as a national emergency that requires immediate action. Joshua Meltzer from the Brookings Institution highlighted the political resonance of this issue, noting that it resonates strongly with Trump's voter base, particularly in rural areas heavily impacted by the opioid epidemic. By associating tariffs with a tangible threat such as fentanyl trafficking, Trump aims to solidify support among constituents who view trade deals with skepticism. As discussions regarding trade policy continue, the Chinese government has sought to position itself as an equal partner, resisting what it perceives as U.S. attempts to impose preconditions on negotiations. Recent delegations from China have engaged with think tanks and U.S. officials in Washington, expressing a desire to explore avenues for cooperation, including significant purchases of American agricultural products and investments in U.S. industries. These overtures reflect a recognition of the economic interdependence that characterizes U.S. China relations, yet they are clouded by the uncertainty of ongoing tariff implementations. Despite these efforts, the trajectory of the talks remains uncertain. Trump's administration has a history of imposing tariffs as a means of exerting pressure, and as Scott Kennedy from the Center for Strategic and International Studies pointed out, the current tariffs could be seen as just the beginning of a broader strategy to reshape trade dynamics with China. Beijing has shown restraint in its retaliatory measures thus far, but the potential for escalation remains significant, particularly as the Chinese government weighs its options in response to Trump's aggressive stance. As the week unfolds, the implications of these developments will resonate beyond trade, affecting diplomatic relations and economic stability in both nations. The world watches closely as the U.S. and China navigate this complex landscape of tariffs, negotiations, and political agendas. The potential for cooperation exists, but the path forward is fraught with challenges, and both sides must tread carefully to avoid further entrenchment in a trade war that could have far-reaching consequences for the global economy. Looking ahead, the unfolding events in China could set the stage for significant changes in U.S.-China relations. The confluence of political motivations and economic strategies suggests that the coming weeks may be pivotal in determining the future of trade between these two global powers. As both nations grapple with their objectives, the potential for reconciliation or further conflict remains a critical question for policymakers and observers alike. In a dramatic escalation of trade tension, President Donald Trump is intensifying pressure on China, threatening to impose an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese imports set to take effect soon.
This move follows a lack of significant action from Beijing to address U.S. concerns regarding the flow of fentanyl and other issues. As Trump pursues a hardline approach, the Chinese government finds itself in a cautious position, attempting to decipher the U.S. leader's demands while avoiding the appearance of capitulation. The backdrop to these developments is rooted in the contrasting responses from neighboring countries Canada and Mexico, which swiftly acted to address Trump's concerns earlier this year. Officials from both nations presented detailed plans to the U.S. government, leading Trump to temporarily pause tariffs aimed at them. In contrast, China's more reserved approach has frustrated the White House, prompting Trump to move forward with the tariffs, which will compound the existing duties that already range from 10 to 25% on over $350 billion of Chinese goods. Amidst this escalating conflict, Trump's communication with Chinese President Xi Jinping remains notably absent. While some of Trump's advisors have engaged in discussions with their Chinese counterparts, a direct conversation between the two leaders has yet to occur. Analysts suggest that China's hesitance to initiate dialogue stems from a desire to avoid appearing desperate for negotiations. Michael Pillsbury, a China expert advising the Trump administration, noted that the Chinese are traditionally wary during initial negotiations, fearing hidden traps. Despite the lack of formal communication, there appear to be ongoing informal discussions within China about potential trade concessions. A recent delegation from China, including former Ambassador Cui Tiankai, engaged with U.S. think tanks to explore possible trade agreements which could include significant purchases of American agricultural products in exchange for a more stable economic relationship. Chinese officials reportedly expressed interest in collaborating on initiatives that could benefit both economies, but are seeking clarity on the parameters of any potential agreement. As the tariff deadline approaches, Chinese manufacturers are experiencing a surge in orders as importers rush to mitigate the impact of impending tariffs. The Global Times has reported that China is contemplating retaliatory measures potentially targeting U.S. agricultural products. Such moves could exacerbate the ongoing trade war, a situation that already casts a shadow over the global economy. In the context of these developments, economic analysts are increasingly concerned about the repercussions of Trump's tariffs on China's economy. Recent data indicate that while China's Purchasing Managers' Index showed marginal growth, the long-term outlook remains uncertain. Economists predict that China's annual growth could slow to around 4.5% this year, a significant decline that could be further exacerbated by the imminent tariffs. China's government is responding to these economic pressures by calling for greater consumer spending and support for the private sector, as articulated in the upcoming National People's Congress. Premier Li Qiang is expected to unveil policies aimed at stabilizing the economy, which faces additional challenges due to the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 and the trade tensions with the U.S. As the world watches the unfolding events, the potential for a trade deal remains tenuous. The Chinese are reportedly willing to negotiate but are cautious about the terms being set by the Trump administration. The uncertainty surrounding these negotiations and the imposition of tariffs could lead to prolonged volatility in the global market. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether both nations can find common ground or if the trade war will escalate further, with implications that could ripple across the international economic landscape. In recent weeks, China has significantly ramped up its military presence in the Pacific, sending a clear message to regional players and the United States as global attention shifts away from its growing assertiveness. A series of military drills conducted near Australia and Vietnam have raised eyebrows and concerns among neighboring countries, highlighting the shifting dynamics of power in the Indo-Pacific region. In February, 3 Chinese naval vessels, including a formidable cruiser equipped with 112 missile tubes, conducted operations close to Australia, sparking alarm as they announced live-fire exercises only after beginning their maneuvers. Shortly thereafter, the Chinese military held similar live-fire drills in the Gulf of Tonkin, right on the heels of Vietnam's own territorial assertions in the contested waters. Simultaneously, Chinese military aircraft have been increasingly active near Taiwan, flying close to the island almost daily. Experts have noted that while these exercises may not constitute full-scale military operations, their impact lies in the political signaling they convey.
Nguyen Kok Jong, a fellow at the IS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore, remarked that these displays are designed to showcase China's expanding naval capabilities and project power across multiple theaters. The timing is perfect, particularly with many in the Indo-Pacific region concerned about U.S. commitments under President Trump's administration, he stated. The backdrop of these military maneuvers is a U.S. administration that appears preoccupied with multiple global challenges, including the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, as well as budgetary pressures on the Pentagon. This distraction has opened a window for China to assert its influence and territorial claims, particularly regarding Taiwan and the South China Sea, where its ambitions clash with those of Vietnam and other nations.
Dan Blumenthal, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute,
emphasized that while the military exercises might seem minor, they are underpinned by China's growing military capabilities. He noted the low-intensity war that China conducts daily only works if the threat to escalate conventionally is credible. As such, these actions are not merely for show, they reflect a calculated strategy to reinforce China's position in the region. In Australia, the response to China's naval presence has been one of unease, particularly given the recent history of strained diplomatic relations with Beijing. Following the arrival of the Chinese ships, Australian officials expressed concerns about the lack of prior notification regarding the exercises, which caused disruptions in civilian air traffic as planes were diverted to avoid the area. New Zealand's defense minister characterized the drills as the most significant display of Chinese military activity seen in the region to date, underlining the growing anxiety among Pacific nations. The implications of these developments extend beyond immediate military posturing. For Taiwan, the specter of uncertainty looms large as it relies heavily on U.S. military and political support in the face of increasing Chinese aggression. President Trump's ambiguous stance on U.S. intervention in a potential conflict over Taiwan has left Taiwanese policymakers grappling with the precarious nature of their defense strategy. His administration's mixed signals regarding military spending and engagement with China only heighten the stakes for Taiwan and other nations in the region. Meanwhile, the Philippines has expressed confidence that U.S. military patrols will continue in the South China Sea, as its ambassador to the U.S. reassured that American support for the modernization of the Philippine military would persist. With tensions rising in contested waters, the commitment of the U.S. to uphold its alliances will be crucial for nations looking to counterbalance China's assertiveness. As the U.S. navigates its foreign policy under President Trump, regional players are watching closely. The juxtaposition of China's military expansion and the U.S. military's shifting focus raises questions about the future balance of power in the Pacific. The prospect of a more assertive China coupled with a potentially distracted United States may compel nations in the Indo-Pacific to reassess their strategies and alliances moving forward. In conclusion, the unfolding situation in the Pacific underscores a critical juncture in international relations. As China continues to flex its military capabilities, the response of the U.S. and its allies will be pivotal in shaping the security landscape of the region. The stakes are high, and the actions taken in the coming months will set the tone for the geopolitical dynamics in the Indo-Pacific for years to come.